And now, from the Marquee Media Studio inside Mark Tank, it's the Mark Haney Show.
Yes, this is the Mark Haney Show, on a mission to ignite the entrepreneurial revolution right here in the hometown we love. And we do that by building the backyard advantage, and that is beginning to happen, my friends. Today on the show, we have Cameron Law. He runs the Carlsen Center at Sac State, and they're making such an impact on our region and on the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So you're going to be thrilled to hear some updates from Cameron, because you know what he does, but it's not just about Sac State. And I think that's important to point out. What Cameron does, what his team does, really affects all of us in Sacramento, and it affects all the startups in the Sacramento region in a big way. They help startups to get to that next level. So you're going to enjoy the show, but I'm going to begin talking about something that's coming our way, and I'm going to be talking about it a lot because it's a big deal, and it's called GFX. It's our big event that's coming up October 5th. Cameron will be there. We're going to have leaders of Sacramento there, and last year we had about 600 people. This year there should be about 1,200 at least, all people that are part of this backyard advantage. And we just landed a big speaker, probably one of the most successful people in the Sacramento region, John Bissell. He took his company public, and he just said, yeah, Mark, I'm in. Well, he told one of our teammates, I'm in, and he's unbelievable, right? He was a startup that came on my show several years ago, and now he's public. It's crazy. Anyway, GFX, October 5th, you got to get signed up. But for now, stick around, enjoy Cameron Law. Psyched up today to be here with Cameron Law. He is the Executive Director of the Carlsen Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Did I have that right, Cameron?
You nailed it. You got it.
So you've been doing that for a couple of years now. How long?
Almost 4 years now.
Oh,
so
my goodness.
The pandemic has a little blur in there for us.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so today we want to talk about the Sacramento entrepreneurial ecosystem, which you are at the center of, and you are really a leader. There's probably a small handful of people that are really leading this effort. You and, of course, Dale Carlsen are doing so much for our community. Why don't we break it down maybe to where we were to where we are? Because I've heard, when I first started my podcast in 2015, you started talking about the entrepreneurial ecosystem and startups, and there was a kind of a pessimistic attitude when I said I'm on a mission to ignite the entrepreneurial revolution. There was a little bit of, I don't know if it was scoffing, but it was like, okay, smirking maybe. And that has begun to change.
Yeah, I think it's, the first thing that comes to mind, I think sometimes Sacramento, we don't always build ourselves up to be the best place that we can be. And now I think we're seeing that start to click in terms of that culture. And I think that biggest shift is people and the culture that's been built around entrepreneurship, and we're actually celebrating. And a lot of that comes from, the amazing work you've done with this podcast, and, just continuing to share that entrepreneurial revolution. And I think what that tangibly looks like, and for me, I've just had the pleasure of operationalizing Dale's vision of saying, hey, we want to serve as this premier region for innovation and entrepreneurship, and really that's a connected region. In order for an entrepreneur to survive and thrive, there needs to be that quick connection to get them to the resources they need. And for me, I think that that's illustrated in your backyard advantage. And so really a lot of what I think we're starting to see is that the resources that are available to founders are becoming more and more visible. And that's because there's more and more people coming and playing in this space and saying, oh, you're an ag tech company, go to John Sullivan and AgStart and get started, or wherever that might be. And so there's just more people in this space that are supporting entrepreneurs and getting to where they need to go.
You started, I think, to say something around mindset. You didn't say it, but I was thinking it as you were saying that. You think there's been a mindset shift in Sacramento's culture? Do you think it's different?
Yeah, I think we're just starting to value entrepreneurship a little bit more. And I think for me, when I, started to really look at the role the Carlsen Center played, is definitely we want to spur startups, but there's a mindset shift that comes with the entrepreneurial mindset. And so we talk a lot about, especially from being on a campus, is the entrepreneurship is the self-directed pursuit to create value for others. And when you create value for others, you empower yourself, right? So you're saying, I have a unique way to look at this problem and create a solution. If I solve that problem for you, yes, there's a monetary value that could be created, but you also become more valuable to that individual, right? And so I think we're starting to see that as a region of we're actually here to solve each other's problems and make Sacramento a better place. And that attracts people to our region because, hey, if I want to start a business, there's this connected community that says, I'm here to have your back and I want you to help me and get to where I need to go.
The first call that I made when we decided to start the Growth Factory, we started the Growth Factory it was a couple years ago, but it really got going about 18 months ago. But my first call was to Dale Carlsen because I knew deep down that he felt similar to the way I do about collaboration and love for our fellow man, but love of entrepreneurship and love of Sacramento, and that we should be more collaborative versus competitive. Because if I go back in time when I first started the podcast, there was a little bit of a siloed mentality, I think, in venture capital and in startups where this is sort of like my little kingdom. And I think Dale is one of those people that has, hit a baseball bat with that, toward that attitude that we need to work together. He's bringing Sierra College in to work with Sac State, and he's making Sac State and what's going on at the Carlsen Center open to the entire region. In fact, you guys probably bring people in from outside the region.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we definitely do that. And I think there's one thing, that attracted me certainly to the Carlsen Center was that vision that he had and just the person that he is, but he's invested in that work, right? It's both obviously the commitment he's made to Sac State and the funding that goes with that, but he's also on the Sierra College advisory board in terms of entrepreneurship, and same with the Mike and Renee Childs Institute at UC Davis, right? And so it's that building that actual connection to say, hey, did you know we're doing something similar at the Carlsen Center? Or, hey, Sierra College is already doing that. Let's just partner with them and build those things together. And so it's really that connective tissue to say, we don't need to replicate that. How do we just continue to leverage what already exists? And those now resources can be utilized in a different way. And I think to get to the point on the, outside of the region was in response to the pandemic, day one, we went virtual, and we started having people from the Germany, everywhere across the globe to sign up for our programs. We're hoping just people on our campus were going to sign up, and now we were getting people from across the the globe. And really for us, I think whether they come to Sacramento to start that company is one thing, but it's also really building up that Sacramento has this expertise to support founders and get them to where they need to go, and know that, hey, I was at this idea stage, I got introduced to some tools and some people that allowed me to get started. Now that continues to build the IQ of our community around entrepreneurship and saying, hey, I can go start a company in Sacramento and succeed.
Well, think about like breakthrough moments. We see it in entrepreneurship all the time where somebody starts a company and they battle. Sometimes they quit, and others battle. And then there's this breakthrough. And the next thing you know, it's not quite as hard for a period of time. You can kind of get like over the hump at some level. And I wonder your view on that with Sacramento, because when someone like Dale commits, right? He's invested. I'm invested at some level as well. And there's other people that are invested that they're not going to quit, right? I think there's a believability when Dale invests that, okay, he's in this for the long haul. And it's those longer term commitments that I think other people start to go, well, these guys aren't quitting. I guess I'm in too, right? And so that's starting to happen. So when you came on board at the Carlsen Center, I know you were running Social Venture Partners prior to that, which is very entrepreneurial as well. But when you came on board to the Carlsen Center, I was on the advisory board, and you were a game changer. But did you feel a breakthrough moment at the Carlsen Center? Because now you guys are making a lot more impact than where you were when we first were figuring it out.
Yeah, I don't know that I could put it on like any particular moment was like a breakthrough moment. I think it's just the heads down work. And then there's like, hey, when we were creating programs, it was like, no one really had ran a virtual program in response to the pandemic. It's like, we're going to try it and we're going to pilot it and see what works and fits. And so I think for us was like, actually, I think for me, one of the things where I started to visibly see how our ecosystem was working together was when we saw, when you launched your first cohort and portfolio, that 27% of those companies had gone through a Carlsen Center or Fourth Wave program. And so for us, that was the ecosystem doing its work to say, hey, we're going to support you at this stage. And then now we're going to get you to get capital and additional resources to continue to grow. And so for me, that was like okay, I think now I see this ecosystem working from that idea to seed and so on and so on.
Well, one of the things I appreciate about you and Dale and the way our team operates is every entrepreneur matters. So some are these companies that are building tech platforms that need venture capital and, want to scale that way. Others are just grinding it out, small businesses, or even freelancers. They're all important and we all start somewhere. And I think it's that appreciation for no matter where you're at in the journey, there's some love there for you.
Totally. No, I mean, we see everything come across our doors, from the technology solution to, I want to create, I want to crochet goods, and how do I do that? And it's all, for us, it's the similar process was like, who are you going to sell the crochet goods to, right? And understanding your customer and getting down to the basics and helping them understand how to get there, and how are you going to get the supplies, and how are you going to, all the fundamentals around it. And so we really want to be that support system for them to go to and to know that that's possible, right? And I think for me, my passion is supporting founders, and I just love, and we've talked about Sacramento and those types of things. And for me, it was actually the governor of Colorado. He talked about why their ecosystem was taking off was because he used this word topophilia, and I used that at our last advisory board meeting. It means it's a love of place, right? And it was like, you could start a business feasibly anywhere you want, but it was like, why Sacramento? Is because you want to build and create jobs here. You want to create wealth for our community and build that here, right? And so for me, my personal mission is like, how do I support those people in building the future Sacramento? Because we all need that person to help us get to point A, or from point A to B. And I want to be that connective tissue to support founders.
Well, you think about an ecosystem. I didn't even know what an entrepreneurial ecosystem was when I started the show. I started hearing those kind of terms from guys like Jack Crawford and other venture capitalists, and I began, investing and learning as I go. But I didn't really understand the value of an ecosystem. I just wanted to share the stories of winning to inspire entrepreneurs. But this ecosystem, if you will, it's almost like a human system that really kind of helps each other grow in its own way. And some ecosystems are weak and they're not really functional. But you mentioned the Colorado area, and Austin is known for that. But when an ecosystem is strong, how much of an advantage is it really for the entrepreneur?
I think it's a huge advantage. I think in one way to look at it is it's really the invisible connections that support people in navigating the resources, the capital, you name it, that's going to get them. So think of, you have a finite amount of time and resources to get your business launched and ultimately to succeed. Well, if there's not this deep connection of people and programs and places, it's going to take you longer to get to that point of the resource that you ultimately need. And that's where you're spending capital and all those things. And so it's hugely valuable in doing that. And I think when we look at Sacramento, the more we can say, yes, we have these things here, but we also have all these connections outside of this region and this country to open markets for founders and get them connected to the things that they need. And so for me, it's a really key component to an entrepreneurial success. But even more, I'd say, in where I sit in the ecosystem, is it creates that place where, oh, I see someone doing this, I can be an entrepreneur too, or I can support an entrepreneur. Maybe you don't have to be the person starting a business, but you said, you know what, I'll be the third employee, or I'll be coming in as that senior executive to help you get from this point to that point, right? And so it's more in that culture component of it. And so I think it's super key to entrepreneurial success.
Well, let's talk about the players. We were talking about entrepreneurs to start. So, the Growth Factory, I think we're now invested into like 34 companies. Before that, I invested into, 50 or so different companies. And where did I see the deal flow? It's interesting to think about where it comes from. A lot of it came from people who had previous success, and they decided they wanted to do it again. So in the Growth Factory, we have a number of those. So they built a company, sold it, had some success, or maybe they were a co-founder and that got sold, and then they want to start something new. We see stuff coming out of UC Davis. We have employees of Intel spin out and other corporations and other universities. So Sac State is obviously part of that ecosystem. But one of the things that got told to me when I first started this thing is we're not going to find enough good companies to invest into Sacramento, but they're here. There's strong people here. Where do you see the growth of that entrepreneur most vividly here in Sacramento?
Yeah, I think naturally I start to think of like industries that we've started to rally around, and I think that kind of ties to the ecosystem component, right? You start to build a deep expertise, whereas like, well, if I want to start this type of company, it makes the most amount of sense for me to be in this space because there's the knowledge, there's the capital that's already invested there, there's the infrastructure, especially if it's something that needs like wet labs or those types of things. And so I think when you think of industries for Sacramento to lean on, and I think back to the first time I was on the podcast at Social Venture Partners, you asked me what industries do you think Sacramento should look at, and I was like, ag technology, and like now you look at AgStart as like one of the big players and really driving us forward in that space. So I continue to see that. And then I think just with kind of the coming work around med tech and biotech, there's a really deep realm of expertise around that naturally with like Aggie Square. And so, as a ecosystem builder, me thinking of those types of things, that's where I'm trying to go get, grants to say, hey, this is how we're going to rally around these industries to build that infrastructure to better support them so they can then ultimately have the resources they need to succeed.
Yeah, you mentioned stuff that's happened around Aggie Square and UC Davis. We're invested into a number of companies that have spun out of UC Davis. And it's interesting that you bring up these industry sectors because they seem to form in these clusters where even back in my security camera day, so we had 5 security camera companies in this region, and we became kind of like a hotspot for physical security cameras in this region, and it really spawned other entrepreneurial stuff around security cameras, and it's in Sacramento. But even in a small business type thing like what I was doing, but you're definitely seeing that in agriculture and med tech, fintech, and other things are just like clustering like organically.
Yeah, and I think one that I think it's a gift and a curse, one that we haven't really fully pushed on. And I know one of the recent launches of Streamline was like the government technology space or GovTech, CivTech. I think we have a unique position as the capital city of, I think now the 4th, or maybe, I don't know if it's the 3rd largest economy in the world, was we have that purchasing power. And now, for me working at an institution, I see the stickiness of once you get those institutions to be customers, they're not to say they're hard to lose, but it's a little bit stickier because you've gone through the process and you've done all those things. And so I think really as a region that there's a big opportunity there. And we've actually had a recent pretty big exit with Cambria Solutions, which has had a headquarter here, and then also I believe in Nashville, run by Robert Rodriguez. And he's really focused in that GovTech space, and that could be another vertical that we start to look at. But I know it kind of also plays on where the government mentality component of things that I think has kind of sometimes hindered us as a region. But if we flip that mindset again, that's a huge opportunity to play in.
It's actually an asset. What are you going to do with what you got? It's one of the questions that we ask ourselves around here all the time. And oh, wow, we have these government entities and we have a bias toward eco-friendly stuff here in California. Why not play into that strength and build businesses around it? It's just change the world with what you got.
Totally. Yeah. It's just flipping that mindset. And I think, one of the frameworks we often talk about is like strategic doing, which all based on asset-based focused, right? It's not, these are problems, like what assets can we start with and then where can we go from that?
Well, one of the things that our region has too, and you were just doing you were just judging a pitch competition. And so I think it was a company out of UC Davis. Correct. And that won it recently before you came over here. But even reaching down into the high schools, from our grammar schools, if we can begin to shift the mindset of our youth into thinking more innovatively and entrepreneurially, and I can change the world too. I don't need to grow up and work for the man. I could go and create my own life and do something that really makes me feel good inside. that can happen. And I think getting into people's mindsets when they're younger is so much more important.
Oh, 100%. I think it's a couple things. One is the just exposure to entrepreneurs. So I think seeing that you can do that is one of the biggest things out there, and to know that, I wouldn't necessarily, entrepreneurship is a career path, but there's a basis to say, hey, I see that and I can do those things too. And then obviously you find what you're passionate about and say, I'm going to go build towards this, or you're going to see a market opportunity that you can do that. And I look at my life, and my grandfather has run a title business, and then my dad's run an insurance company, and so I've seen myself in and around that, and so it's kind of you surround yourself with those people, and so the more we introduce students at an earlier stage to say, hey, here is an entrepreneur, and they're doing these things where they're creating jobs and value for our community, is a huge component. And then obviously just being introduced to components of, hey, if you have an idea, take action on it, and bring it to reality, and here's some frameworks that you can do to do that.
100%. And it's interesting because you think about being an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter where you come from. Anybody can do it. We just need to get these young people and adults exposed to this possibility, right? Is that, and that there's access to people who have been there, done that. That access is here. We're providing that access.
Yeah, and one of the things that is a funny thing that came to mind was I was thinking we just ran this startup challenges. Like basically in one weekend, we get a bunch of people in a space and they pursue brand new ideas. We had people go from not even having a product to making revenue that weekend. But one of the things we asked them beforehand was like, what do you want to get out of this weekend? And we had, I think, 3 or 4 people say, I don't want to be a wannapreneur, right? They wanted to actually experience trying to start a business and not just do the, drop shipping type thing. And, there's entrepreneurial components to that, but it's a little bit different in terms of building a business. And so for me, that was that mindset shift of I want to do this and actually turn something into a full-fledged business.
That's so cool. We're doing a program, I think called Roseville Rising for high school students, and they're building businesses. And at the end, there's a pitch competition called Mark Tank, and it really is exposing people who are sophomores in high school to building businesses, and there's some really cool stuff happening in that program.
So yeah, at that startup challenge, Sophia, she ended up forming a team, and they over the weekend they went from doing a kind of financial literacy type app to pivoting to a student budgeting app where students that receive FAFSA funding, that they could learn how to spend the money down, and they ended up winning the top prize in the idea stage. And so she was working with a couple of the Sac State Buzzley team members, and so took home the top prize, and hopefully continuing to push that forward. But yes, amazing ideas, and really that it's that process of helping them get out there and talk to people to learn about what are their needs and how could they solve them as an entrepreneur.
Well, you mentioned Buzzley. That's a company that has formed out of Sac State that is it's making great progress. Can you highlight what's happening with Buzzley?
Yeah, so Buzzley, they ended up, I still remember vividly, they were in the Carlsen Center, and they had just kind of formed as a team, and they were really looking at this crux of, do we want to just pursue this as a senior project? So on campus, engineers, they have to work on a project to graduate, and they realized kind of the synergy as the team there, and they ultimately, I was like, you need to push forward. This could be a big opportunity. And therefore they, went on, and last year they were in a national pitch competition. So they took home some prize money from eFest. And then I think they've won a couple other competitions locally, but they're currently working with Sac State and bringing in revenue. And they're currently expanding to, I think, 3 other universities. So started to identify that need. And, for them, one of the big learnings is, the sales process of working with an institution is you might have a decision maker say, yeah, I'm good to go, but that person has to, help go through the process of all the I's you have to dot and T's you have to cross. So
great learning, and it's great to see it. These young men, right? There's 2 guys, right? And they're kids, but they're building this real business. It's really impressive. So thinking about the players, we've talked a lot about entrepreneurs. One of the other groups that you've touched on at some level is the investor. So the Sacramento Investor Network is part of the ecosystem. And when we're building out an ecosystem, we think about who these players are. So we have the Sac Angels, we've got the venture funds, we have, high net worth individuals. But most people would describe the Sacramento ecosystem from an investment standpoint is underdeveloped. Would you agree with that? And what would you see we need to do to change that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you always hear from entrepreneurs is not enough capital investing, which that could be to a degree. But I think when I look at Sacramento, yes, there's definitely room to grow in terms of investment. I think for me, always one of the things that came to mind was I think of how the people that have the capacity to invest came to that wealth to invest. And a lot of it was through a less risky fashion of starting a business, and nothing's wrong with that. And they're entrepreneurs in their own light, but they don't necessarily maybe understand the pathway for a technology startup to grow. And so there's more risk innately in that type of business. And so I think for me, things like that, this podcast or anything that's following in and around kind of the technology startup scene gets that education going around, hey, I feel a little more comfortable investing in this space, or understanding what the asset class of venture capital is and how that could help my portfolio or those types of things.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm seeing good progress in that. And this is definitely not investment advice. Yeah. I see this as more of an education. And, into the Growth Factory, I think we have 100 investors, and many of them have never invested into this asset class before. They've come off the sidelines, as I like to call it, and becoming, we're their first exposure to this asset class. But the more that people understand that this is available, it's going to take off. It did in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley. It has in Austin. It has in other jurisdictions, other towns, and it can happen in Sacramento. And I think it is happening at some level. And it's more people just, I agree with you, getting educated and putting their foot in the water.
Right. Yeah, and I think and I'm not an angel investor and don't have the capacity to invest at that stage. So I can only speak from my perspective, obviously. But I'm thinking of getting to understand who those people are, right? It's just maybe a whole new industry. So think of, hey, you've been a developer all your life, that space, and you're like, well, I've invested in apartment complexes, I've done many deals in that space, but it's a little bit different when you start to say, oh, who's in the venture capital space, and what does that ecosystem look like? Because it's very different than some of the other ways that people have gotten to that level of wealth. And so I think that education, but also finding ways to ease them into that ecosystem to see that there is the startups out there, right? Like if what they're hearing is like, oh, well, all I hear is there's not the deal flow. Well, it's like, well, look at our deal flow. There's a ton of startups out there, and seeing the successes that we're ultimately seeing in some of these companies, starting to exit.
Warren Buffett says that if you want to own a piece of America, buy stocks. And I think people, if you wanted to own a piece of Sacramento up to this point, you buy some real estate. And now there's actually a way to invest into Sacramento businesses. You can buy some stock in these businesses. That really hasn't been possible in the past, and now that it is. And so some of these companies that we're talking about, these tech companies, could be Buzzly. These could be some of the most influential businesses in our region 10, 20, 30 years from now. And it's a place to, I guess, invest for the long haul. It is high risk, but there's a way to do it now.
Yeah, no, there's definitely now more of the vehicles, right? I think, Sac Angels has grown as a membership, and then obviously with you guys coming online, and just there's more opportunity to invest outside of just being okay, I got to invest my own thing, and how do I do the due diligence, or what do I even look for in these companies? Now there's either, I'm going to invest in the Growth Factory and they're doing the, due diligence for me, or I'm, a Sac Angel and I'm part of that committee and working and those types of things.
Well, there's some of us that are, I'll call it relentlessly local. So Growth Factory is focused local, right? Carlsen Center, you guys are focused local. Even though you're drawing people in from Germany online, it's like you have a real local focus. And there's certain groups that have decided to do that way. Some of the venture companies invest into local startups if if they make the grade, but they're strictly about getting a return. Sac Angels, same way. I think 30% of their investments are here local, but it's that relentlessly local mindset that I think will push us over the top. And I think we need more people to want to own a piece of Sacramento and go local. There's this whole movement around shop local. Why not a movement around invest local?
I love it. I don't know that I could put it any better, Mark. But I think that's a huge thing, and just finding ways for them to plug into that world that they might not have seen, right? And maybe they see from the tech startups or the big tech startups that are not profitable, that are listed on the stock exchanges, things like that, where it might not be really connected to, hey, this is creating jobs and opportunity and ultimately growing all of Sacramento going forward.
And I better clarify too, this is not solicitation. Our fund is full, and so we're not looking for investors. But I think that we should have that mentality. Right. Like one of my favorite songs growing up was that the Beach Boys sang was "Be True to Your School," and it's kind of I'm an old guy, but that always resonated with me at some level. It's like, look, let's build from the inside out. Let's be true to our town, and there are ways to do that by supporting small business and by investing even into small businesses. Okay, so the other players in the ecosystem. We talked about entrepreneurs. We've talked about investors. You touched on AgStart. There's and third wave or fourth wave. Yeah. We got the Growth Factory's got an accelerator. You guys are accelerating companies. Talk to me about how well we're doing in terms of building accelerators.
Yeah, so I think, in terms of like traditional accelerators with you're kind of the traditional accelerator with the company fund, right? So I think that was the first time we have had a traditional accelerator. Then we've kind of had these, I would say a lot of our work, we're kind of like a pre-accelerator, and that's really to get people prepared to say, hey, we're ready to go into this next stage and really get ready for investment. You have Fourth Wave, which is an accelerator for women-led technology companies, certainly is focused on supporting those founders and getting investable, but also really helping them build their capacity as leaders to then build teams that succeed. And so that's a really core component to that program. And so I think, from an ecosystem perspective, I think we have a lot of programs and resources to support these early stage founders. I think it's starting to, I think where we're starting to see is some of these more specific programs for a particular type of business. So you mentioned, or we had talked about AgStart, right? And that's very focused on ag type of technologies and companies. And so it's that leaning into that particular industry focus that will accelerate some of that even further versus some of the more just business fundamentals and foundations that they need to succeed. Yeah. And so I'd say that that's really an area for growth. But I think, we're starting to see the people and programs be there to support these founders. Well,
I have to, you brought up AgStart and John Sellup over there. I know he's leading the charge, and it's his investment that has made this happen. And a lot of his, he's putting it all out there to make that happen. You got Gary Simon over at Clean Start. The other person that comes to mind that has done so much for our community is Laura Good and what's going on at Startup SAC.
Yeah, no. So there's I think my three biggest mentors in what I'd call them mentors, or people I've looked up to as like ecosystem builders, was Laura Good, and then Jeff Bennett, who was her co-founder, and he retired a couple years ago, and then Monique on your team. And so those are the people, when I was getting into this work, I was like, I want to be like them and do that work. And so I think Laura is one of the first people that people go to in the entrepreneurial ecosystem that are getting started. I think we call her the den mother of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and it's really just that great place to start. And I think a lot of that for us is to that invisible network that's an ecosystem, right? Was like, oh, you're this type of company, you need to go talk to this person, right? And so we have started to look at kind of how we can scale this work. And so working with Monique and Laura and a lot of these people, we formed the Sacramento Entrepreneurial Growth Alliance, which is this regional alliance that we're focusing particularly on how do we invest in the ecosystem builders to ultimately build this infrastructure to support founders in succeeding and creating more density around that. And so one of the tools we've brought online is called the NorCal Entrepreneur Hub, where any entrepreneur can go on, say they type in, I'm a female founder, I'm at pre-seed stage, and I'm looking for an accelerator. Boom, it'll sort through all the information, and Fourth Wave would pop up, and probably the Growth Factory as well, since you'd fit some of that profile. And so it really will help expedite some of that resource finding for entrepreneurs, but it also for someone like me, as it scales my work, right? If someone's like, hey, I want to connect with you to learn about how do I plug into the ecosystem, well, there's only a finite amount of time in entrepreneurs to connect with. And so I've started to see my Calendly link start to continue to fill time spots with some of these awesome early stage founders. And so it's sending them these types of resources that will get them started much more quickly.
So cool that we're working together. And I think it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, where it's that collaborative mindset can really set Sacramento apart. And I think it's what can make us special. We do have that type of people at the helm in building this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that came to mind right there was just like light the beam, right? If we really lean into, I mean, I think we have the best fans in probably any professional sporting team out there. And so for me, like, if we continue to rally around founders in that way and have, maybe there's some chant that we should come up with, like
yes.
Light the Beam that, really celebrates that type of success. I think we'll continue to get people to say, I can do that too, and I'm going to jump into it in whatever way that is. That could be you starting a company, but that could be you coming in to say, you know what, I work for this corporation. Let's go run a pilot with you to figure out to see if this thing works, right? And so it's like we all play a role in this. And so how can we have that mindset to say we're going to support our founders, and if we do that, they're going to create jobs, they're going to create opportunity for our community.
Yeah, I've been to the first two Sacramento Kings game and seen them light the beam, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful. It really brings Sacramento together under our sports franchise, our beloved basketball team. But when an entrepreneur succeeds, there deserves a celebration. There should be a light the beam. We need to make that happen here. That's why I started this podcast in the beginning, is to celebrate the wins of Sacramento entrepreneurs. And you know what? Now we're winning more than we ever have. And so we need to use your branding mind around light the beam for the entrepreneur. So I love that idea. In terms of the other players in the ecosystem, the one that has been important to the Growth Factory are the economic development people. We have GSEC, and we have cities like the city of Roseville, city of Rockland, counties like El Dorado County, people like yourself at Sac State and Sierra College. But we have these economic development places, and they're beginning to put their money where their town is as well. They're seeing the value, if you will. And so to me, we aren't known for that mentality in Sacramento. I would say we're known for the opposite mentality in Sacramento, but we're starting to see that change.
Yeah, there's definitely been a mindset shift, and I'd say that this is actually a national trend that's starting to take place. And so, for me, is like the more we push on that accelerator earlier and start to not only create that space for entrepreneurs to succeed, but have people outside the region say, that's where I want to go to start a company. They have the infrastructure to support me, but they also, my dollar might go a little further than going to the Bay Area and some of those types of things. And so it's in terms of dollars and cents, in terms of investing in entrepreneurs, they're proven to be the net job creators for any community. And so in terms of economic development, that's a core strategy to invest in. It's not the only strategy, but I think we're starting to see more and more investment in that space because there is great ROI in investing in entrepreneurs. And I think for me, the more you create that space and culture for that, you're going to have that attraction that's part of your other strategies as an economic development organization. And one of the things for me, the Kauffman Foundation, I don't know if you're familiar with them, based out of Kansas City, and they do a ton of research in this. And what we had actually seen was I think even as of last year, entrepreneurship and new business starts was at a 30-year decline. As much as we celebrate and enjoy entrepreneurship, we are at all-time lows of new business creation. And so I think we're starting to see that click forward of we're going to start to invest in entrepreneurs because we need it to be economically viable and competitive, not only as regions, but also internationally as a country. And so it's a really key thing for us to get behind. And so, I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship as a driver for economic development.
Well, you talk about jobs, and those are vital. But one of the things that it seems to me that we need to do And what I'm working on is helping these companies to sort of get over the hump so that they can attract other people's money. OPM, we always talk about that. And I've been talking about that in doing real estate since I was a kid, since I was your age or younger. Get other people's money, leverage that. And if we can get these startups to get investable, if you will, there's enough venture capital in the Bay Area and other places around the world. And if we can get it to come into Sacramento to invest into Sacramento companies, and then we can start attracting customers from around the world as well, other people's money coming into Sacramento, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's a key component. It's, I definitely mentioned the job portion, but it was like that attraction of capital and people to that community if there's that vibrancy around entrepreneurship. And I think, we're starting to see, part of that is, I would say, pandemic related, but part of it is also just now we have a better ecosystem to support founders, but people aren't saying, or say from the Bay Area, we're going to invest in you, but you have to move to the Bay Area to run the company. It's like, no, your dollar goes further and there's the infrastructure there to succeed and you can still access customers wherever they might be.
Well, you think about the potential brain drain too. Somebody graduates from UC Davis and wants to change the world. Right. Why would you do it in Sacramento if we don't have a good ecosystem here? But it's becoming a place where you want to stay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's actually one of the big areas for growth, as like, if I'm thinking of like with my ecosystem builder hat, is like, how do we make that causeway a little bit shorter? Mm-hmm. I think that's been one of the big things. And I mean, I'm from Sacramento, went to Davis, and most of my friends were from the Bay Area and they went straight back to the Bay Area because there's that gravitational pull. And so the more we can introduce some of those experiences, and I think, the role like Dale playing on their advisory board or people mentoring those startups, they start to see, this community's here to support me. I'm going to start my business here because I already have the network that's supported me to this point and continuing to grow. So, like today we had that circular economy innovation competition where actually two of the teams were from UC Davis. And so the more that if we get them to start a pilot at the Western Placer Waste Management Authority, that's a basis for them starting their business, and now they're going to grow and keep those jobs here and ultimately attract capital if they're getting investments. So.
Well, you think about the emerging leadership and the open job opportunities, if you will, as we grow as an entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? The growth factory grows, then I'm, working on bigger things. Monique's working on bigger things. Sac State, Carlsen Center grows. You're working on bigger things. We need to backfill for these vacancies that end up occurring when we, when we grow as people. And so you think about the up and comers. Who's out there right now? Are there some up and comers?
I mean, working at a university, I'm like, okay, I think that these couple people could be that next level set of ecosystem builders, and a lot of that's just getting them connected early in their time at university or in college to say, oh, I can see how this is, and now they feel more confident hopping into those types of things. And so I think there is that next level, but it's kind of figuring out how do we really get them in depth and knowing the ecosystem. Was, I don't claim to be like I have like a super smart background or anything, but it was, showing up and having the connections to say, okay, when we need to partner with the growth factory, I know how to run that type of program or bring the right people together. And so it's a lot of getting those connections that we as leaders have to connect to that next generation of people. And I think that's actually, for me, one of the biggest challenges was, if I go to that job, who's going to take the Carlsen Center job, right? And those types of things to say, continue to build that ecosystem going forward. And I think that's we often, and rightfully so, have entrepreneur first, but how do we build the builders who are supporting these founders and continuing to grow? One
of the things I'd like to say is throw a party that people love to come to. And if this can be a party that people want to come to, it's an impactful opportunity. It's people want to change the world, and by helping entrepreneurs, it is a way for somebody to change the world. And people need to understand that this is a platform that people can grab onto. You could be a part of this backyard, this ecosystem. Just come on in, grab a hold.
Yeah, no, I mean the energy of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I mean, I think it's hard. I don't know how I wouldn't work in that space at some point. I often do get asked like, oh, like, do you see yourself starting your own business at some point? And, maybe down the line, but I think for me, like my joy and passion is supporting the founders, and I'm still in the work, supporting that and knowing that that's my role to play in supporting founders. And so, my call out to anyone who is of that type, definitely reach out to me. I would love to chat with you. And I remember one of my early times getting introduced into the startup ecosystem was through 1 Million Cups, which is an amazing program to support founders. But it was just that energy of people, feeling raw of like, hey, here's my idea and I'm pitching it for the first time. And then the way the community rallied around and supported those founders to say, hey, I have some ideas, or you should talk to this person, and really getting that support for them. And so if you're of that type, come hang out with me, or come to 1 Million Cups, and we'll get you plugged into the ecosystem.
I love it. One of the things that I think is important is as we step back from this situation, right, from this ecosystem for a second, and think about what's missing. What do we not have that we ought to have now? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think two thoughts come to mind. And this was actually something that we kind of asked the community. So we did this report. It's called the E3 scorecard, and it looks at different building blocks of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I jumped back into the ecosystem there, but I think the two things was, and we've started to see a growing base with Sacramento Inno, but really what the report told us was the narrative around entrepreneurship isn't fully there, and or startups, right? And we're starting to see more and more of that. You have Sacramento covering it, but there isn't that full bought in of like just us telling our story. And part of that is, you have busy people and you're like, okay, I can't even, it's going to be, when do I post that? Someone won this pitch competition, right? And so it's how do we continue to build that narrative and say amazing stuff is going on in Sacramento, and that will help get those people off the sideline to say, oh, I want to start something, or I want to invest. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. And then I think the second one is, really kind of on that capital side. I'm thinking the earlier, like even, first money in type of, we have the Sac Angels, and, that's a great community and membership based in, investing in local companies, but even a stage earlier to get some of that capital to get people off the ground, I think is really one of the elements that we need to focus on.
Okay. So closing thoughts. I keep thinking about like what's important that we need to work on now. Right, tonight I have an event here. We've got big GFX. So my focus has been, in terms of what's important now, helping our startups that we invest into succeed and get the message out there a little bit, as you described, getting the word about the Backyard Advantage out there. And we're doing that through GFX, our big event that's coming up October 5th. I'm at the beginning stages of writing a book. I'm working on a TED Talk. So I'm thinking for me, what's important now is working on the messaging, but now what's important now for Cameron Law?
Yeah, what's important now? I think, for me, one of the keys is as we kind of introduce this conversation, is the ecosystem is growing, and that's good. And I think I'm at the point where it's like, oh, I can't attend that event, or I can't go to this one, which is a good problem to have, even though I want to be there and support the partners and the entrepreneurs. But I think it's still, even with this growth, how do we maintain a critical mass to like push this work forward, right? And so, you have awesome stuff going on at Startup Folsom, and obviously up here, and you have things going on in Elk Grove, and obviously in the city of Sacramento. And I was going to name every city basically, but like, how do we continue to rally around that? And for me, one of the biggest things was, how do we get our cities to invest in this more regionally? Because as someone running programs, it's really hard to say, oh, well, I'm going to run this program specifically for founders in this area because they come from everywhere. Right. And so really building that regional mentality to support our founders, I think, is really a key component. And that's partly messaging, but also getting those leaders to come together and say, let's all take a click forward as a community. Right.
A rising tide lifts us all at some level. And I think GSEC has done that in many ways, maybe not specifically around entrepreneurship, but around getting cities and corporations and to work together for the common good.
Totally. No. And I think that, that model of that GSEC's done is exactly kind of what we're trying to look at the Sacramento Entrepreneurial Growth Alliance as, is like, how do we get those people together? Because what that also does is gives us that common narrative to say, hey, there's this opportunity for us to go for an EDA grant that can invest millions of dollars here, obviously into the infrastructure, but that goes into our founders by giving them the support that they ultimately need, making it easier for everyone to get started. And so I think that that's where I'm focusing my energy on, is how do we continue to build those people, and then also how do we start to backfill and get these earlier stage leaders that are wanting to get into entrepreneurship and ecosystem building to say, oh, I want to be at the table to start pushing the vision forward for the greater Sacramento region's entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Cameron Law, making it happen in entrepreneurship, making an impact, wealth of knowledge. We appreciate you sharing the wisdom today, but more importantly, for what you do day in, day out for our entrepreneurs. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to the Sacramento region continuing to grow. So
you bet. Welcome back to the Mark Haney Show. Yes, Cameron is, this guy's a young guy, and he's done so much with his life in this short period of time, and he is on the rise in Sacramento, and he's really doing a lot. He's got one of those hearts that says, I want to help, and the way he's doing it is through entrepreneurship and through startups and through driving innovation and changing the way a lot of us think about entrepreneurship. So really an educational segment, but really for me, it's great to see a guy like Cameron Law grow. I've known him for the last several years, and now he's a true leader within our region, and it's nothing short of spectacular. So proud to know Cameron, proud to call him a friend. And just a reminder about GFX. I'm going to keep hammering that because you have to get signed up for GFX. It's October 5th. The leaders of Sacramento converging at the grounds and really talking about how great we're going to be, but also getting new information, new connections that can help us take our businesses to that next level. So October 5th at the grounds in Roseville. It's an all-day event. The speakers are lining up. I mentioned earlier on the show, John Bissell has agreed to come on. I'm going to be kind of teasing the exciting things that are happening with GFX over the next several weeks. So anyway, to all you out there, fighting the good fight for entrepreneurship, fighting the good fight for our freedom, our security, our way of life, here at Haney Biz, here at the Growth Factory, here on the Mark Haney Show. Never above you, never below you, always by your side.
Thanks for watching today's show. My goal for every episode is that you find a takeaway, something tangible you can use in your business today. And if you have a comment about a favorite takeaway, feel free to put it in the box below. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to bring up on the show, don't forget to let me know. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Because at Haney Biz, we are always by your side.